And I don't think it's a coincidence that the transfer window opening has coincided with their loss of form, because I'm told there are still quite a few unhappy players at that football club. Kyle Walker, obviously on his way out at the Etihad, it seems. He won't be going to Saudi Arabia. He wants to stay and play at the highest possible level in Europe, not least because he wants to get his 100th England cap.
The window will slam shut this time around on February the 3rd. Before that happens, do you envisage Arsenal signing a striker?
What they're not going to do is a panic signing.
Hi everybody, welcome along. You know what we're bringing you by now, of course. This is the latest edition of the talkSPORT Transfer Notebook with myself, Jim White, and my colleague here at talkSPORT, Chief Football Correspondent Alex Crook. And as you know by now, we are joined by top guests from around the world of football today. Mr. Crook and I will go alone because Alex, as he has been showing it thus far, is the key bringer of the transfer news, and today is no different. The sagas, Alex, it is fair to say, just do not stop. What have you got for us?
Well, it's intriguing, isn't it? Because there's not actually that many deals that have got over the line so far, but there are so many movable parts. And we should start really by talking about Chelsea, because we got the news this morning that Trevor Chalobah, on the day of a game, probably would have been the team to play for Crystal Palace at Leicester tonight. He's on his way back to Stamford Bridge. And I think this does represent a little bit of a climb down by Enzo Maresca, because we'll go back to the summer. It was a frantic summer there. We broke the story about Conor Gallagher being banished from the first team dressing room. That didn't go down too well with the powers that be at Chelsea. But Trevor Chalobah, who's come through their academy, very much part of that so-called bomb squad as well. He was training away from the rest of the first team. They made it clear to him that he wasn't part of Maresca's plans. He joins Crystal Palace on loan. He's done well for Palace. I think him as part of that back three, alongside Marc Guéhi and Maxence Lacroix, has been a key part of their revival after a difficult start to the season. Now, Chelsea, having started to leak goals, having to start slip further and further away from Liverpool at the top of the table, they decide that actually Chalobah is good enough after all, and he's going back there. So somewhat of a climb down from them. I'm pleased for the player because he came through the academy. My information was that he didn't really want to leave in the summer. He felt that actually he could be a key part of Chelsea's plans. He's going back there, and I expect him to get plenty of game time in the Premier League.
Can you bring us the latest then, or does that affect the destination or otherwise of Marc Guéhi? Because obviously last time around it looked like he was going to head to Newcastle. That didn't happen. I mean, is he going to head to Stamford Bridge or is he going to stay put?
Well, I think this is one of those deals with Chalobah going back that will have a domino effect. Axel Disasi, my understanding is, will now be allowed to leave. Chelsea wasn't part of the squad last night. Again, Enzo Maresca has decided he doesn't fancy him. Juventus and Fenerbahce, Jose Mourinho's Fenerbahce, two potential destinations. In terms of Marc Guéhi, we wondered when Chelsea stopped Chalobah playing in the FA Cup for Palace at the weekend, was that a power play to try and force their hand when it came to negotiations for Marc Guéhi? Doesn't look that way now. They were just simply making sure that when they did recall him, he could play for them in the FA Cup. In terms of Guéhi, I expect him to stay now. Certainly that's what he is expecting. Until the end of the season, it'll be into the last year of his contract by then. So there'll be a big decision for Palace to make, because there's no obvious signs that he'll sign a new deal. Even when that Newcastle move collapsed, my information then was that he had no intention of extending his contract. I've not been told anything to the contrary.
Alex, I've always meant to ask you, since the arrival of Todd Boehly and Behdad Eghbali, what have you made of Chelsea's overall transfer strategy?
It's been a bit scattergun at times, hasn't it? I think it's fair to say. I think they've overpaid for players. We'll go back to that fateful deadline night when we were being told from sources very high at Stamford Bridge that they were going to get Enzo Fernandez at all costs. That proved to be £105 million. Then they smashed the British transfer record to sign Moises Caicedo for £115 million. Mykhailo Mudryk, they stole him away from Arsenal. Obviously, he's got his own issues at the moment, but that's not a signing that's worked out particularly well. But then you look at Cole Palmer. I'm not sure there's been a better signing in recent transfer windows than Cole Palmer. You look at the number of goals he scores, the number of goals that he creates. I think Manchester City's loss is very much Chelsea's gain. The jury probably still out on Nicholas Jackson. Missed some big chances in their game against Bournemouth this week when they probably should have been out of sight by half-time. So I think it's still hit and miss. And what is interesting this transfer window, we came into January thinking that Enzo Maresca had created a very harmonious environment. Chelsea were being talked about as surprise title contenders. They've found wins hard to come by since then, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the transfer window opening has coincided with their loss of form, because I'm told there are still quite a few unhappy players at that football club, not least Christopher Nkunku, who's absolutely desperate to get away, and we know that Bayern Munich are interested in him.
Okay, Alex, before we started today's podcast, a number of questions that I want to put to you. One of them is, can Alex tell us the latest on Odemwingie? Is he Premier League bound?
No, he's not. Tottenham tried to sign him. Daniel Levy, I think, was heading the negotiations, but I think his preferred destination was always Juventus, not least because Didier Deschamps, the France manager, former Juventus player, I think has been steering him in that direction. And obviously there's still a big draw. Italian football maybe not what it once was, but there's an argument to be made that Juventus is still a bigger club than Tottenham. But I think it's a blow for Spurs because Ange Postecoglou has been desperate to get bodies in. They've signed the young goalkeeper, I think he's done really well, kept a couple of clean sheets, but they still need some outfield reinforcements. Muani was also linked with Manchester United, wasn't he? But I was told quite early on, don't pursue that. That's not really going anywhere. But yeah, he looks Juventus bound. He's having a medical, probably as we record this podcast. So very much back to the drawing board for Tottenham.
For sure. People out there don't think for one moment it's a quiet window. It is not. We'll get to Manchester United in a second. Manchester City, this intrigues me. But let's start, Alex, with Omar Marmoush. What's the latest with what would be a big money move?
Well, I was told at the weekend the two clubs not far apart in terms of agreeing a fee. Crucially, as happens with these deals now, personal terms won't be a problem. Personal terms already agreed. Clearly, he's keen to make that move from Manchester City. I think Frankfurt are a little bit surprised that somebody is willing to pay their asking price at this time. They thought maybe a summer departure was more likely, but Manchester City's need is quite desperate, isn't it? I was at the G-Tech on Tuesday night. They were 2-0 up with 12 minutes to go, drew 2-2. Could have lost that game, and Bumo had an effort cleared off the line in the last minute, and Erling Haaland missed a hat-trick of chances. The issue that City have got, and I'm not saying I told you so, but I did flag this up at the start of the season. They sold Julio Alvarez for massive money. No problem with that at all because the fee was too good to turn down. But they didn't replace him. And that means that Erling Haaland, whether he's fully fit, whether he's fully firing, which clearly he isn't at this moment in time, he has to play pretty much every minute of every game. So I think an alternative to Haaland is an absolute must. And I think that deal for Marmoush will go through. And they're signing a couple of defenders as well. Kyle Walker, obviously on his way out at the Etihad, it seems. He was left out again against Brentford. Pep Guardiola wasn't particularly keen to talk to me about that when I spoke to him live on talkSPORT after the game. But I think if he goes, they're probably going to need a right back as well because they played Mateus Nunes in that position in midweek. He's a midfielder by trade.
So no latest on Kyle Walker's future. Pep was a bit short with you.
He was very short with me.
Yeah.
Man, a few words after that game. I think what we can say, and we reported this earlier the week on talkSPORT, he won't be going to Saudi Arabia. Obviously, that they would like to take him. There's a big money contract on offer. He wants to stay and play at the highest possible level in Europe, not least because he wants to get his 100th England cap.
Sure. Alex, as always, whether Pep liked it or not, Alex was right to ask the question. I was in Paris on the night that Rodri won the Ballon d'Or. Given the injury and the long-term nature of the injury to Rodri, should they not be in the market for a midfielder?
I'd have thought they should be. And actually, one of the things Pep did enlighten me on after the game was that they struggle in that central midfield position. He admitted that. They brought on Ilkay Gundogan towards the end of the game. He doesn't look a shadow of the player that he was when he left Manchester City for Barcelona. So I'm slightly surprised that's not a position they're looking to address. Different type of player, Cole Palmer, obviously. But it must be keeping him awake at night, Pep Guardiola, that he had that talent in his fingertips and he allowed him to leave and join Chelsea.
And he was there and they let him go. At a price. On Manchester United, everybody is consumed by the fact that Marcus Rashford may have played his last game for Manchester United. Any closer to a conclusion on that one?
I don't think so.
No.
I think we've hit a bit of a standstill when it comes to Marcus Rashford. We know that AC Milan were planning an approach to United, but then they got wind of the fact that Kyle Walker would be available. They can't sign both players because Serie A changed the rules after Brexit. You can only have a certain number of non-EU players. Of course, now that we're no longer in the European Union, Marcus Rashford and Kyle Walker count as non-EU. They only have space to sign one. And I know that the board there are not particularly happy with the form of Emerson Royale, the former Tottenham defender. In fact, their former manager, Paulo Fonseca, warned them against signing him, as far as I understand it. So I think Walker, at the moment, is seen as more of a priority than Rashford. Where does that leave him? Borussia Dortmund have inquired, but they're turning their attentions elsewhere, seemingly as well. We know they're in talks with Arsenal about Alexander Zinchenko, having failed to sign Renato Vega from Chelsea. Juventus were mentioned in dispatches, but they've got Muani now, who likes to play as that left forward, which of course is Rashford's preferred position as well. Barcelona is one to keep an eye on because I was told right from the start of this process, Spain and particularly the Camp Nou, would be Marcus Rashford's preferred destination. But they're pretty stocked up with wingers, and of course they've only just been able to register their European champion Dani Olmo because of their own financial problems. So at the moment, I'd suggest he's in a bit of limbo, Marcus Rashford. And you wonder, that offer that West Ham have put on the table, does that become more likely as the window progresses?
Can you imagine it? Alejandro Garnacho, he's in the conversation, linked with a move away. Is that likely to happen?
I don't think so. In fact, I reported this morning that both Kobbie Mainoo and Alejandro Garnacho, very much part of Manchester United's future. They'd be very reluctant to sell either this window. Never say never. If Napoli, for example, having made a lot of money from selling Scaradonna to Paris Saint-Germain, decided to put £70 million on the table for Garnacho, that would give United a decision to make. Likewise, if Chelsea suddenly decided to do what they do in a lot of windows and make a curveball move for Kobbie Mainoo and were willing to pay big money, they might have to consider it. But at the moment, there's other players that United would rather move on, the likes of Antony, who we reported yesterday was interesting, Real Betis over in Spain, Casemiro, who still has a potential move to Saudi Arabia on the cards, and Christian Eriksen as well. Quiet around him at the moment, but I think if a club came in for Christian Eriksen this window, United would entertain offers.
Christian Eriksen. How many, I'm constantly asked this, you must be too, because you're so close to it. How many transfer windows do you think Amorim will need to whip this team into the shape that he wants it to be in?
Well, I don't think it's an overnight fix. And I think he's made that pretty clear with some of the language that he's been used. He warned Manchester United fans there would be a bit of suffering. I don't think he meant in terms of relegation battle. I don't see United as part of that conversation, particularly after the last couple of performances. But they had to suffer for an hour with 10 men against Arsenal at the weekend. The squad isn't really moulded to the way that he wants to play. So he's going to need, for me, 4 transfer windows, realistically. If you're talking about getting Manchester United back to being challengers for the Premier League title.
Yeah. Alex, Arsenal, often in the conversation. Martin Zubimendi, you were texting me. This man gives me information while I'm on here with Simon Jordan. And you were texting me about Zubimendi just yesterday. Today, where are we at with this fella?
Well, this is not one for this transfer window. I think what Arsenal are trying to do, actually, is trying to secure the signing before other rival clubs come in the summer, because there's still a distinct possibility that Carlo Ancelotti leaves Real Madrid. Obviously, they were hammered by Barcelona at the weekend, and that Xabi Alonso is the next in line for that job. I think if Ancelotti does leave, then it's pretty much a fait accompli.
Wow.
And I know Alonso is a big admirer of Martin Zubimendi, so I think Arsenal are trying to get this deal done to make sure that Real Madrid can't come in and hijack it. Personal terms, again, already agreed between club and player, as I understand it. But it won't be for this window, it'll be for the end of the season. It's been billed as Arsenal beating Liverpool and Manchester City to his signature. But I'm told from a very reliable source that Liverpool, having come close to signing Zubimendi in the summer, aren't reactivating that interest. Mainly, I think, because of the form of Ryan Gravenberch this season. OK,
Alex, we do know that the window will slam shut this time around on February the 3rd. Before that happens, do you envisage Arsenal signing a striker? This is constantly the conversation, isn't it?
It is, and the latest information I have is that they're not panicked, despite the horrible injury for Gabriel Jesus, and we all feel for him because he just started to find the back of the net, and now he's going to miss the rest of this season, probably the start of next, with a serious knee injury suffered in that FA Cup defeat against Manchester United. But they're not going to be reactionary to that Arsenal. They're not going to panic. I think we've been telling Mikel Arteta in the media, haven't we, that he's needed a centre forward since the summer, but he's been pretty stubborn that Kai Havertz can do the job. They've got Leandro Trossard, who can play as a false nine, Martinelli as well, and even Raheem Sterling, when he's fit. He's been the sort of forgotten man at the Emirates this season. The way I see it is if they get an opportunity to sign a player, and I think the funds are there, not just for this window, but who's going to benefit the football club in the long haul, he's going to be there for a few years as the number 9, they will do it. What they're not going to do is a panic signing like we've seen from, say, Manchester United in previous transfer windows. You're not going to see Wout Weghorst pitch up at the Emirates this window, or somebody of his ilk.
Where did he ever end up? We saw Liverpool draw 1 apiece with Nottingham Forest at the City Ground, and the 3 all started. The 3 being Trent Alexander-Arnold, Virgil van Dijk and Mo Salah. Any latest in the 3 of them?
Not really. Negotiations continuing. I think this is always going to be a long process. We expected some kind of definitive answer re Trent Alexander-Arnold before the end of the month, because of course if he wants to, he can now speak with Real Madrid. He can sign a pre-contract agreement with Real Madrid. So I think that one will probably develop quicker. There were reports in Holland last week that Virgil van Dijk was close to agreeing a new 2-year contract. That was immediately played down by my sources at Liverpool. And Mo Salah keeps telling us, doesn't he? This is my last season at Anfield. That's why he wants to win the Premier League. That's why he wants to win the Champions League. And those Saudi noises continue. So I think it's a problem for Liverpool, clearly, when you let 3 of your best players get into this situation. And I do think maybe that's the reason we're going to see quite a quiet transfer window from Liverpool, because their main priority is sorting out the futures of those 3 big stars. There have been some reports linking them with players this week. I'm told they're not particularly close to any signings. We've mentioned Zubimendi already. There was also a scurrilous report that they rejected a £70 million bid from Saudi Arabia for Darwin Núñez. Let me tell you, if they get offered £70 million for Darwin Núñez, they will bite their hands off. That bid never came in.
Okay, so much for the business from some of the clubs in the Premier League at this stage. The Transfer Notebook Archives. This is where Alex and myself pick a famous or infamous transfer they recall for whatever reason. I'll get to mine in a second. You want to throw in yours at this stage?
Yeah, I want to talk about Aaron Ramsdale, actually, because
Yeah.
I was the first to report that he was going to go from Sheffield United, just relegated to the Championship, to Arsenal. £25 million the fee. I remember going on air with Laura Woods at the time and Ali McCoist, and they both mocked the £25 million fee. Arsenal fans were in uproar. Why are we spending £25 million on a goalkeeper who's been relegated from the Premier League in successive seasons with Bournemouth and Sheffield United? And I think immediately I leapt to Aaron Ramsdale's defence, because I know what type of character he is. I know what a good goalkeeper he is. He's not at Arsenal anymore, and I think there's still some Arsenal fans who are sad to see him go, despite the former David Raya. But he played a massive part in them getting back in the Champions League, becoming part of the top 4 conversation. Arsenal fans immediately took him to their hearts, and it just goes to show sometimes you can write off a player too early, and I think he certainly proved those critics wrong.
Nice one. Alex, I don't think we've ever seen anything similar to the one back in January, the 31st in 2013. Do you remember it? Peter Odemwingie.
I do.
Somewhat surprised everybody by pitching up in a Range Rover outside Loftus Road, home of Queen's Park Rangers, on that particular night. And it looked as though this was Peter Odemwingie on the verge of a move from West Bromwich Albion to Queen's Park Rangers. The only thing was, nobody appeared to know anything about it. Only Peter Odemwingie appeared to know that Peter Odemwingie was about to join QPR. In any event, it didn't happen, and he stayed with West Bromwich Albion, albeit it wasn't a very harmonious relationship thereafter. In Peter's defence, Alex, he's always said to me, that day he had been advised to get off his mark, get to West London, because it did look like the move to QPR was going to happen. He was advised by people at West Brom, he was advised by representatives, get down there and that will speed up the actual move for you. And that's why Peter did show up outside at Loftus Road. The move never happened. Peter knows why. Kavi Solikol and myself in a book wrote about this, and Peter himself said to us, one day, I will reveal names. I will name the names involved as to what happened to the breakdown, regards the breakdown of that move. But Peter that night was left with a bit of egg in his face, had to go back to the Midlands and resume where he left off. One day he will name names. Peter will be around when you name those names. And thereafter he stayed, not for long, with West Bromwich Albion. Alex, we're enjoying it. This man at the centre of everything, and as long as Alex Crook is around with talkSPORT, I guarantee it, you will not miss a trick. That's it from the two of us right now. For even more content from the talkSPORT Transfer Notebook throughout the week, you can listen to wherever you get your podcast from.